Not that anyone was expecting a psychological phenomena to underpin a discourse's quality on the issue of tolerance and tolerable. What I think what one was in the position to ask was the difference between A and M when understanding people or attempting to do so could be approached where our cognitive biases occur less forefrontly in the question of A and otherwise preceding question. One hoped we could recognize ourselves enough to give way to what we see first less. It's different from condescension in strictly subjective senses, but it was also a time where free-flowing thought could have been still acceptable yet honest enough to not be an excuse to be vulgar at that mindfulness. Observance was key here. But truth be told, we are not at political correctness this time anymore. But one could still be an asshole bottom line and render a consciousness able. The past half-decade didn't leave us with much of anything else than the juxtapositions of the willingness to be at any other level with humans, but amidst observance we were, and consciousness could still have more activity relative to the worst. The refugee crisis and white supremacy was causal and affecting from my side as well, and by the circumstance of what hates see when they don't want to see it. Put very simply, and when dissonance leaves wake, I live and have lived at gunpoint and witnessed explosions in my time, at distances but eventually, gunpoint in a corner. I write this under duress for several reasons, including active shooters. As race itself comes to question, Morgan Freeman put it nicely when asking about solutions when he said stop talking about it. From there it simply asks someone what they would like to talk about, but you then ask why are you here? Because in truth, skinhead is known where I live, but extremisms as they are more poignant have fired the shots. For reasons pertaining to causality as it's already understood to be my enemy at this time. My local causality brings me to the most implicating combinations of criminals. Dissonances of perception were involved. Neuroticness and validation were as well. Rumor control, and eventualities of people. Some people believed money would be involved. Others that something virtuous would come from it. Hates at the socioeconomically pretentious, and put broadly, where they see what they want. The community I was in was rife with it. What my life had to do with what, spanned states of nature as excuse to sound intelligent, weakness and strength and value and epistemological interpretations of nature as excuse for reality. Ideological and extreme obviously. Corporate culture would come to be among the bid for a shot at a loose end, as my existence implied a solvency or 0 point of interpositon in their control over reality. The convergences of causality would reach their own flashpoints of uncoherent grasping. For now, the duration leading up to that. I've spent much of my time in a correspondence of events so to speak, as the time unfolded. Though interpreting the world and bypassing the narrowing being something of the dirty secret despite the time's busybodies. I'm in inquiring diagnoses predicated on a large world, as conflict and immersion as the world as itself is an elusivity of domains, and what's at stake in the future. I like documentation as windows into the world. There would have been a geographically considerate sentiment between places as a subject, the tribal, active conflicts, disparities and accomplishments alike, if not more intimately inquiring to life, with a quiet foresight and solemn, but that's another issue. And no, I don't believe I was in control over that, maybe just engaging and witnessing. I was outspoken in foresight otherwise. On several issues. But at the aforementioned time in history, the world in the wake and somewhat eye-opened realization of a need for the best in humans, the Trump administration's time stood apart from, and underpinned the world's displacing urgency, and extremes at large. I can't speak for where causality stopped and began, but that element of change hailing from a culture's already active elements, where extremists and statement came into question, sometimes obvious, sometimes, not so purposeful. This has been a turbulent time. And acts of violence have occurred obviously. Perhaps all that never had a clue, could have the best of natures at questioning. All change and urgency stressing the resolve towards life in a time when so many people were in migration, what we could afford and what we could compensate for not being very flexible to some. Lesser evils I for one would have a second time. Otherwise the merits and extremes of tolerance and tolerable and things and people converging was daunting, especially during the refugee crisis. Change itself is both skittish and inevitable, but it was happening. It's the hallmark of a readiness at least, to not generalize. Everything that cakes a brain notwithstanding against the first thing I see when I see it, where the worst of unhinged beings so mild receded we don't actually tolerate them. All transferring of past and reinforced recoil makes a psychology varyingly malconnected, or for some personal and registering blind side of reasoning, malconceived association, and even impassioned sentiment. We only find the hate within. The point is we see more, at least we are supposed to. But even if we take something like men with power and what men with power want, a basic capacity and human second thought in asking what that had to do with a random person. As an individual, as a qualitative question otherwise, was a common sense not so common. I'll give human the benefit of the doubt, until what's not in doubt is evident. We ask for nothing less,